Hey everyone, for those who don't know me, I am Marcy and I work for Brazen, and I have been having some PMS problems these last couple of months. I just started working for Kirsten, so I'm about to walk into her house and she is going to help me with my PMS problems. Hello.
Hey Marcy, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm so happy you're here today.
Me too. So tell us, what are we going to be doing?
Well, you told me about your period problems and how much concern you had over it, so I decided to have you over to have a conversation about really trying to figure out what's going on with your period, how is that related to everything else in your life, and to come up with a solid strategy to fix it. And hopefully everybody who's watching this video can learn a ton about doing that for their own period too. So shall we sit down?
Yes, let's do it.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about what's been going on, from when you got your period until now. I'm gonna ask you so many questions, but why don't you just tell me your story first?
The biggest things for me when it comes to PMS, bloating plus constipation. I also don't get really good sleep. My sleep is very dysregulated.
So when you have brain fog and you're not pooping and you can't sleep and you're bloated and your breasts hurt and you're feeling anxious, what do you miss out on? Access to your power and your mojo. I mean, for me, when I used to have PMS, I would feel like, wow, part of my month is stolen from me, in which I don't have access to my most badass self.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate that any women or people with periods anywhere have even a single day in which they don't have access to all of their inner strength. Helped over 10,000 women who were trying to get pregnant. The way that we helped them was to fix all of their period problems and the things that were associated with it. And so what we were able to find was that when women had insomnia, especially the falling and staying asleep kind of insomnia, that they often also had scanty menstrual bleeding. So ideally, we've talked about this before, you want to have 4 days of menstrual bleeding, soaking a tampon or pad about every 4 hours, and without any clotting. Clotting will make you have more bleeding, and then when you get rid of the clotting, often it goes down to almost nothing. So we're looking for 4 days of bleeding without clotting. And so with that, how many days of bleeding do you have?
I've been having about 2 days. Most recently, it's been the first day is very heavy, and the second day is like a little bit of bleeding, and then the rest of the week is like tiny.
Scanty. So on the first day, is there clotting and pain?
Yes.
Anytime that you see clotting in the menstrual blood, you'll almost always, not 100%, but almost always see kind of heavier bleeding on those days where there's clotting. As soon as all the clots have been discharged, suddenly you see how much blood there really is to discharge. And the menstrual blood is amazing. I mean, the menstrual blood gets such a bad rap, like that. I don't know why we can samurai somebody's head off on a movie and everybody like, oh, that was awesome, blood spewing everywhere. And you see a tiny bit of blood on somebody's pants from their period and you're like, oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? But what we have to do is transform that conversation that menstrual blood is so valuable for us to understand our health.
Right.
And so when you have this, once you get rid of the clotting, you'll see the volume of the blood. And when there's not enough blood, it tells us we have to look at a couple of things. We have to look at the quality of food that you're eating. We have to look at the quantity of nutrients, right? And then the ability of digestion to break it down, turn it into energy, turn it into marrow, and make blood. With the Brazen formulas, we use herbs in those formulas that help make blood. And we use herbs to help dissolve the blood stasis to get rid of the clotting, which is why the formula works really well. But what really helps is if we can go back, like when the app comes out this year, to be able to understand which of those problems around nutrition or digestion are causing the scanty bleeding, then we get to start making this profound impact on the people who use our products' health. So let's talk a little bit about your diet. Tell me what a typical day in the diet life.
I have IBS. So digestion has been something that has been challenging for me. And in a normal day, like I try to eat fairly healthy.
Do you exercise? How much? What kind of intensity? Why do you choose that, etc.?
I tend to like to run, and I do Pilates also. I used to be like really into Pilates, but I don't have time for going to the studio anymore. But running is easy because I live in an area with a nice public park.
I'm gonna recommend that you stop running.
Really?
So I'm not saying you should not exercise, so let's be very clear about that, but the kind of exercise that you do when you don't feel that great and when your period is not good, you have to decide like what's more important to you. And so when you're running, every time you take a step and you contract the large muscles in your quadricep, that muscle, every contraction requires nutrients and oxygenation. And where does that come from? From your blood. And so walking is a gentler version. When you're running, you're actually using a lot of energy. That's why it's so effective at burning calories and helping to manage your weight and building muscle. All of that is really effective. However, the more that when you look at distance runners, right, they get very lean, they stop menstruating, right? Because they're using more blood than they can produce.
I have Raynaud's, not always bad, but like I went on a run yesterday. When I started running, I felt like I had no circulation in my feet. When I stopped running, when I started walking, I could feel the blood going back to my feet. So is this what you're kind of talking about?
Right now you have 2 solid days of menstrual bleeding, but you have clotting. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna use herbs to get rid of the clotting. That will make the pain go away too. But once you get rid of the clotting, that pathological bleeding, like we talked about with the placenta, is gonna stop. And we're gonna see how much blood there really is. And my guess is when the clotting is gone, that you're gonna have more, like I would recommend is that you start doing 2 20-minute walks a day.
Okay.
So, which is not that hard to do, even when it's cold. Just bundle up, go get some fresh air, just go walk around the block one time. Do home yoga. I like to watch junky TV, and so what I do is I compromise, is I watch junky TV, and then I sort of do yoga while I'm doing that.
Nice.
So it's nothing, you're not doing a lot of sun salutations, you're not doing a lot of work,
Right.
You're just opening. You're using yoga to just build a little bit of core strength. Like we're talking 15 minutes. I think we should talk a little bit about some food things to do.
Sure.
When I was still a clinician, I would always say, if you don't do anything, if you leave this clinic today and start doing these 2 things that can make a big change in your health. The first one is to eat congee. Congee is basically the nugget of Chinese medicine. And what you do is you take 1 cup of brown rice, organic brown rice, and 8 cups of water, a little bit of ginger and a little bit of cinnamon, unless you're super overheated, and put it with a little bit of salt in the crock pot overnight. So you're gonna cook it for 8, 10, 12 hours. And in the morning, it's gonna smell super good in your house. Take out the ginger, take out the cinnamon, and use a hand blender or your Vitamix or your food processor. It's easiest if you just go to Target and buy a hand blender, and then you're gonna puree the hell out of it. And it's gonna turn basically into a rice cream. So the reason you're doing that is what we talked about before, like whole grains are incredibly nutritious. You can practically live on them. I do believe that some small amounts of grain in your diet is useful. You make it into a food that is highly digested. Like practically the crock pot is done what your digestion doesn't have the capacity to do. And you want to eat this with a significant amount of fat on it. So with a nice big blob of organic butter or ghee or coconut oil, like a tablespoon or more. Like make it really yummy, put a little bit of honey on it. You can sprout some chia seeds, and then just eat this every single day for breakfast for 1 or 2 months. And what you'll notice is you want to bring something with you to work or to school that's high protein. So whatever high protein feels good to you, whether that's a cheese stick or some hard-boiled eggs or whatever you like, you will be hungry in about 2 hours, even if you're a person who doesn't wake up very hungry in the morning. But what you'll start to notice is that in a very short period of time, that your blood sugar will start to get very, very stable, and that your cravings for sweets, because essentially you're giving your body some food that's highly nutritious that your body doesn't have to work for. And so suddenly you start getting really nourished from the food that you're eating, from the congee, and you stop needing to have that sort of dose of sugar, especially premenstrually. It isn't a food that you can just eat today and then you won't have sugar cravings. It basically is a kind of medicine that you're gonna eat every single day for a couple of months. It's so easy, you make it on Sunday, you'll have breakfast, it'll almost last a whole week. Whatever you don't eat by the end of the week, feed to your animal, they usually like it. Make a new batch on Sunday, and you can just warm it up in the microwave.
So I've heard you say so much about mindset and the impact that it has. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, how 1, everything's related, and 2, how there's not one fix for any of these problems that are causing your PMS. And one of the things that really doesn't get looked at enough is our mindset, what we think about. And there's so much data that show us that our minds are so much more powerful than what we give them credit for. In fact, often it's considered sort of like the soft science part of an intervention. But in my first company, Conceivable, we built basically the same version of the app for Brazen, in which we were helping to improve women's fertility. And it had interventions around diet and sleep and water and vegetable and nutrition consumption. And then there was a section on, we were customizing Chinese herbs for them. And there was a whole section of intervention around mindset. And after we did the clinical pilot with 125 women, we were able to increase the likelihood of conception, which means we improved their overall health so much better that they had a 274% increased likelihood of getting pregnant as a result of doing the program for 90 days. Now, why that's important is that afterwards, the data scientists who were helping us look through the data were like, well, what was the thing that got the people fixed their periods and got them pregnant? And the reality was there wasn't one. There wasn't one thing that was weighted heavier in terms of like, oh, the herbal formula or what really did it, or oh, it was changing their diet that really did it, or oh, it was changing their exercise. Actually, in the end, those things were almost equally weighted except for one thing, and that was mindset. I think that we forget how powerful our minds are and what we think and how much that determines how we feel, how we operate in the world, what we believe is true. So much so that there's good studies that show that when you compare what people are actually doing to having people doing the same thing in their mind, that often the results are not that different. Olympic athletes now, when they get injured, say you're a skier and you get a compound fracture of your femur, now the way that they're training is part of their training is they're doing upper body and they're doing the leg that works, but they're also in their mind still imagining in full experience that they're skiing, imagining that they're sweating, imagining being cold, imagining every single experience and getting the same training benefit from that. So when we talk about mindset around our periods, it's super easy to get into the trap of I'm a person who really suffers every single month with my period. I'm a person who gets anxiety before my period. My period sucks. I'm a person who suffers. And I think that it's really important that is real. And you are having a really hard time with your period. As long as we identify like that is who we are, then we start to look for evidence to support that, as opposed to start to looking for like, I am a person who can transform my health. Transforming my health is possible. And you can start to make the decision like every day I'm gonna look for how am I a little bit better? Because this process doesn't happen overnight. As you look at the whole system, you start getting a little bit more sleep, you drink a little bit more water, you get a little bit better nutrition, you manage your stress a little bit, you exercise a little bit less. Suddenly the system starts to shift a little bit by a little bit, and then suddenly you get a quantum change. So that is really the power of really paying attention to what you think is possible. Even if you think that you have an open mindset, I encourage you to start challenging the way that you think about this. And you can start to make the decision like every day I'm gonna look for how am I a little bit better? Because this process doesn't happen overnight. As you look at the whole system, you start getting a little bit more sleep, you drink a little bit more water, you get a little bit better nutrition, you manage your stress a little bit, you exercise a little bit less. Suddenly the system starts to shift a little bit by a little bit, and then suddenly you get a quantum change. And that is where the real power is. That is where your head gets fucking blown off because you're like, holy crap, like everything was kind of moving along and not making much difference. And then suddenly my period came and it was so much better. And then the next period, it was so much better. Now, we've been talking forever, so I want to take just a minute to recap everything that we've talked about. We started this conversation talking about PMS and the symptoms that you were having. And Isa said, well, then let's dig down into where that, what's the source of those problems and how are those related? And what we were identified was like, that energy is low before your period, that blood production is compromised by both digestion and over-exercising. Even though you're not exercising a ridiculous amount, that's compromising your ability to get rested and restored, so you can't fall asleep, stay asleep. That's leaving you waking up groggy. We know that digestion needs attention, so we want to look at ways to improve that. And we know that probably when we get rid of the clotting, that there's going to be less blood. You're not going to be worried about that when you see that, because we'll have peeled back the layer of the onion called get rid of the clotting. Then we see, okay, really how much blood there is. and then we start working from the other end. The last thing is just remember that like we're gonna use the Brazen herbs, the cramping formula, to get rid of the clotting. When that happens, there's gonna be a lot less blood, so don't be alarmed by that. Then we're gonna see really how much blood there is from how much you have to 4 days of soaking a tampon or pad every 4 hours for 4 days, and how to get there. So let's talk about the strategies to help get there. The first thing that we wanna do is you wanna start sleeping as much as humanly possible. Yes, thank you. Ta-da. Everybody's so happy with this piece because we live in a culture that sleep is like forbidden, and that if you take a nap, you're lazy. And I would say that you should know that people who nap every day live like 7 years longer than people who don't. And it can be a real reset. The trick for napping is to limit it if you have to go back to work. And some people have a problem with napping because they'll sleep for like 3 hours. Set a timer for yourself for 30 minutes and just make yourself get up. Usually within 30 minutes, you won't get into a super deep rest, but on the weekends, let yourself sleep as much as you need to. You know when you don't need naps anymore, when you can't nap. So after napping, the next thing is to eat congee. And basically you want to start trying to eat because your digestion is not what we would like it to be, and it's more gentle for your IBS, is to start trying to eat more soup. And the trick is to make 2 soups on Sunday and freeze half of it.
Okay.
So you'll make 2 whole soups, take half of each one and put it in the freezer for next week.
Okay.
And then eat that soup for lunch or, whatever.
What kind of soup?
Just things that sound good to you. Just the longer cooking process makes it easier to digest. Cut it up small so it gets really cooked.
Okay.
Certainly things with root vegetables are strengthening to digestion. So now it's, winter and cold. So I know you don't do dairy, so you could make like a cashew milk butternut squash soup, which would be so yummy.
Sounds delicious.
You could even use like bone broth, like cashew milk, bone broth, and butternut squash, lots of onions and garlic because it's warming to digestion. The next thing is I want to see if we can incorporate a little bit more blood building foods. And so simple things that are super iron rich or help to make blood are just eating more parsley in your diet. So parsley is incredibly iron rich. Just keep it in your fridge, and if you make your soup, just chop up some fresh parsley on top of it. If just whatever you're making, if you make chicken salad, throw parsley into it. Just every chance you get, add a little parsley at the end. Dried apricots have more iron than beef per ounce. So they can make you, gassy and super stinky farts. So if they're hard for you to digest, I know you told me that your mom likes to stew prunes. You can stew dried apricots too. That can be an option. And dark berries like blueberries and blackberries, kale, collard greens, all of that. Do your homework on the mindset that we talked about. Just set those timers and pay attention to it. And then last but not least, start taking the Brazen formulas for PMS and for cramping. Because even though you don't have really bad cramping during your period, you do have the cramping before, and you do have clotting. And so the PMS formula isn't gonna get rid of the clotting. And in order to sort of make more blood, like you see a lot of vitamins that are for PMS and things like that. Those are mostly vitamins like magnesium, calcium, B vitamins, which can support PMS, but they aren't gonna get to the underlying cause of the PMS like the Brazen formulas do. But we wanna make sure that we support digestion, that we make more blood, but that we get rid of the clotting first, because when you make more blood, when there's a lot of clotting, you make more clotting. Suddenly you're making the situation worse. So we wanna make sure that we have the right order of operations and that we're not like building a whole bunch of blood really quickly if we're not getting rid of that clotting. Otherwise you can get more pain and more clotting in your cycle, which is not where we wanna go. And you're gonna walk for 30 minutes. Once or twice a day, and just do home yoga while you're watching junky TV.
You guys in a month and let you know how it went. But it all just, even hearing about this stuff, it just like feels good.
I just got a little bit choked up from that, because the one thing that this conversation often provides for people is hope.
Yeah.
And there are so many things in the world that we don't have control over, but the majority of women that I get the honor to work with are at a place where they're hopeless, right? They're like, my period is so bad, it's kind of ruining my life. It's really stealing all of this time and energy and inspiration from me. But they think, this is just what it means to be a woman, and this is what I have to tolerate. And suddenly, after we're able to have this conversation, you can see, like I can see it in their eyes, like, oh, it doesn't have to be this way, and it actually doesn't seem that far off. Like what we need to do to start working on this month over month doesn't seem that hard. And so I'm so happy that you said that. So thanks for sharing that in the end.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
It's been great.
It's been awesome. Thanks for tuning in. Can't wait to do the next one.
Bye. See you next time.